Hey guys, it's Khadroth again. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about 2021's Christmas on NA, aka Galemas. That is going to be Nightingale's Christmas event. This is going to be the universal video that's going to cover sort of the people that work on just about all the nodes. But I think right now we want to start out by kind of talking about the overall structure of the event and how that's going to work for you guys. So there's a couple things you guys need to know about the structure of the event. For starters, it's again going to be a Christmas event, which means it's not like NeroFest. It doesn't work in a, 3-hub type of system where you can farm only the Lotto currencies in the Lotto nodes and only the shop currencies in the shop nodes. Instead, Christmas moves throughout. So as we go through the event, you guys are going to be able to get drops for both the Lotto mats as well as the shop currency, which is exactly what everyone wants. Now, Day 0 will have a sort of precursor set of nodes. The event should start in the morning, and then already by reset sometime around 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific, it should already have reset and given us the Day 1 nodes. But for that Day 0, everyone's focus is going to be on gathering just enough materials potentially to get the craft essences out of the shop. That's going to be your primary goal there on Day 0. Now, from there, the best node in Day 0 is a saber node, and there is a saber node later in the event that's better for farming purposes, so we're not going to cover Day 0 at all. Instead, anything that works on that saber node should also work on the Day 0 saber node. So again, that might be your final destination on Day 0, but then already as of reset on the server that day, you guys should get Day 1. Now, Day 1 is going to be assassins. Day 2 is going to end up being berserkers, and then Day 3 is going to be casters already. Day 4 is where we're going to encounter yet another saber node, and then Day 5 is going to be our final one. It's going to be the lancers. That's going to be the best node. We should have that for several days of the event. That's going to be the big node that everyone wants to hit, and that's going to be the big node that we spend a lot of our resources here on the guides for you guys for. As we move out, each of those nodes will have drops, like I said, for the shop currencies, so you guys don't have to worry about farming out the shop on Day 0. You will have plenty of time to do that naturally by farming those other nodes each day. So as long as you guys are playing the event regularly, that shouldn't be an issue. Again, the final node should just be Lotto currency though, so by that final node, you guys need to have the event done. Now, there's one other thing I wanted to talk about with you guys, and that's gonna be our Lotto CE this time. It's called Traces of Christmas. Now again, this is gonna drop the bandages, the band-aids here that are gonna be the Lotto mat, but it's actually going to be really good. Even at non-MLB here at first, it's going to give 30% gauge and 8% to quick and NP generation. But at MLB, it becomes 10% to quick, 10% to NP generation, and 50% starting charge. That is really nice. That's exactly what we want out of a Lotto CE, because it's going to facilitate more people to be able to handle Lotto nodes, as well as more comps to be 6 CE this time around. Again, we're still in the pre-Castoria era here on NA, but you guys should see right here with this Lotto is where a lot of the 6 CE stuff is going to start. And it's going to be really nice. We've had more options here than we've ever had before on NA, so that's going to make it difficult to cover, but we're going to try to get you guys some of the best ones. Now again, another good thing about the C is it's all attack scaling. So if you guys decide you need a little bit more oomph, a little bit more firepower in one of those comps, especially if it's a Lotto drop CE comp, a 6 CE comp, you guys can stretch that by leveling up one of the CEs. Even down the line, if you were to decide that you no longer wanted this CE and that you just didn't use it and you thought leveling it to 100 was a waste, you can always take that CE and use it to bomb a different CE up to 100. So there's a nice little thing here in Lottos that you can almost temporarily level your CEs if you so choose and then put them into another one. But this one, as you guys can see, is actually a pretty good quick CE. Some of you guys might want to level 100 it naturally anyways. So this is a good target for both not only outside of the event, but also stretching your capabilities within the event. And that's kind of why I wanted to go over it. Okay, so remember, this is going to be the universal video. So these are going to be people that work on literally all the nodes, or at least most of them. Now, again, I think it makes sense here to start out strong with our quick comps, because this is going to be someone that is going to be pretty synergistic with that Lotto CE. Now remember, here on day one, you guys might not have MLB right away of the drop C. There's only going to be 4 copies in the shop. You will have had to have already gotten a couple of drops in order to safely MLB that to run a 6 CE comp. However, let me state, if you do not have an MLB CE yet, you can replace with any good 50% CE. A really good one and an example for this would be the Suzuka CE, aka Heavenly Demon Princess. That was a welfare CE from Summer 4. That's 50% starting charge and 15% NP damage on that. So that could be a really nice one to use as a substitute for having the MLB drop C if you want to pull one of these off. But otherwise, typically speaking, our drop CE comps where our nuker has the drop CE on should be a 6 CE comp, and that's where we're going to start out with right here. Like I said, there's going to be a lot more of these in this lotto, and you guys can look forward to that. But just be aware you might not have everything you need right off the bat on day one, and we're aware of that. You can sort of plug and play. You could even start with something like an MLB imaginary element or a K-scope or whatever if you just needed to get the looping going. So you guys can use whatever you need to facilitate as a replacement for that MLB drop C, but obviously these comps are designed to be 6 CE, which is the maximum amount of drops you can possibly get. So for our first one here, we are going to be doing Dantes. Again, Dantes is going to be really strong with that Traces of Christmas CE. It's quick up, it's NP gain, and it's really going to help him out. The only thing you guys are going to have to worry about is potentially if you replace that CE, is he going to struggle on the refund? And he shouldn't, especially if you replace it with a more powerful CE like the Suzuka Thighs one. But you guys can see we're actually able to get away with NP1 on just about all these nodes, and that's going to be a good thing about this comp. So right out of the gate, this is pretty friendly as long as you have a Dantes. The problem is obviously going to be then on the support requirements for this comp, which does require your own Scotty as well as a support one and your own waiver. That's going to be a hard barrier to entry from some people. However, remember, there is going to be a Scotty banner right before this with the download campaign sometime around November. So keep your eyes peeled for that. If you guys still need Scotty, maybe prepare your resources ahead of time. But yeah, again, you guys can see our first node here is going to be the Assassin, so they're already not going to be that good for refund. But Dantes, even at NP1, is still going to be able to clear everything. And on most of these comps, we're actually going to end up using a defense down from one of the Scotties on both Wave 2 and Wave 3, and that's just to kind of facilitate that NP1 so that we're spreading the damage around. But again, right there should be no real issues with Dantes on the first node here, and you guys should be okay. So then for our next node here, this is going to be the Berserker node. Now, a lot of people are going to struggle for refund purposes on the Berserker node. Again, by here, you're probably going to hope that you have that MLB drop C because 49% on that wave is pretty spicy. Again, we are using a defense down here, so you guys got to be careful. If you're worried about missing that mark, you could certainly, with some units, pre-card, but in Dantes' case, you don't need to because we did not build in his 3% per turn charge skill that he gets being an Avenger. So you guys are good. This 49% is actually 52%. He should be easily capable, and we always calculate our refund with the base minimum damage roll. So again, this should be a relatively easy node and nothing you guys need to worry about. And really, the Berserker node is going to have a lot of solutions for it because everyone's going to be effective here other than perhaps Berserkers themselves. Now, as we get to the Caster node here, all of a sudden, the refund becomes a lot better, but as you guys can see, we're going to get a little bit of an issue finally here with our final wave, as Edison has a chance to live with about 13.4k. Just remember, Dantes does defense down with his NP, so this shouldn't be a big issue for people. Again, this being casters, it's not like your support casters would be resisted either. It's just going to be a neutral node for them. So you guys should be easily capable with all the buffs flying around to handle a 13.4k amount. Plus, remember, this is a quick comp. Stars abound, so you're literally going to be able to crit just about on command. So again, another really easy node, and at least this one makes the refund super easy. And then now we get to the Saber node. This is our next to last node. And again, you guys can see here that the refund is okay. There's not really going to be any concerns here. Instead, our concerns are going to be on the damage output of both waves 2 and wave 3. Where Corrupted God might cause you some issues and Suzuka might cause you some issues. But again, I think with the crits, you guys will be fine in this, especially because you're looping even from turn 1. Worst case scenario, you do have Dantes' third skill to help you out. I actually recommend a lot of the time taking it only to like something like 4, so you guys can actually typically have enough as long as you have the 3 enemies to hit in each wave to generate the stars, and you should in this one. And now we get to the Lancer node. This is going to be the big daddy, the one that we all want to kind of farm. And you guys can see we've bumped it up to an NP2 here. And again, the only problem with that though is going to be Bryn. So this will still be 6 CE even by the final node, but now we've had to increase the NP level requirement. So be careful here if you guys only have an NP1 Dantes. It's not that you couldn't make it work. You still absolutely could. In fact, you might be able to shift one of the defense downs. Just understand you're going to be cutting it pretty close on that demon. So what you guys can do here in this sort of scenario is if you wanted to make it work with an NP1, play the cards. Look for the turns where Dantes is going to get his quick crits. If he gets it on turn 2, you don't need the defense down probably for that wave. If he gets them instead on turn 3, you can use the defense down in turn 2 and you should be fine on turn 3. So there's enough that you guys can do to make sure that you balance the node out and instead just say, hey, I'm gonna card count and try to pick when that quick crit card comes up to blast things away. Your only real problem is going to be then if you end up getting like all of Dante's cards in turn 1, just having it be a little bit of a waste. But ultimately at the end of the day, this should be pretty manageable. And then at that case, remember NP2 is always here as an option to just make this relatively brain dead. Okay, now for our party composition and turn node for this 6 CE Dantes comp, I want you guys to start out with a front line of Waver, Dantes, and Scotty, with Scotty on the back line right there. So for turn 1, you're going to go ahead and pop all of Waver's skills on that Dantes, get him charged to full, and then go ahead and Plugsuit him already. Here, now I want you guys to use both Scotty quick ups on Dantes and make sure that you pop Dantes' second skill for that NP gain. From there, you're good to go ahead and NP and he'll easily handle all of the wave 1s. As we end up in turn 2 here, you guys can go ahead and use one of the defense downs, although like I said, if you're in that Lancer node, you can kind of play with this. You can also use Scotty's skill 3 here to charge Dantes up to full. He should not have any sort of issues outside of most of the problematic refund waves, but again, should be good here to go ahead and NP and easily handle this. Sometimes you might have to card, sometimes you might not. And then in turn 3, now go ahead and use the second Scotty defense down. Go ahead and use the final Scotty charge skill on Dantes, and then go ahead and pop Dantes' first skill for that extra attack power. Then use the Plugsuit attack up, and go ahead and let her rip. At that point, again, you might have to card depending on the node, depending on the NP level you're using, but ultimately this should be a relatively quick and easy 6 CE comp for you guys. Okay, now for this one, we have a 5 CE comp now for Dantes. This is going to be the Super Scope comp. Now, I can confirm you don't have to have Super Scope. You can make this work with K-Scope, but then at that point, you have to use Plugsuit, and you're pretty much the 6 CE comp from earlier. So this is predominantly going to be a thing for whales who maybe haven't gotten MLB of the CE yet. Otherwise, you don't necessarily have to do this. Again, the thing to look at here is you are going to have your own Scotty in this case, and we're going to be using Fragment of 2004. So it's just less button clicks than a normal Plugsuit comp, and that's kind of going to be why you're going to use this if you don't have the MLB yet. Again, the requirements are only going to be NP1 until we get to that Lancer node. It's going to get bumped up to NP2 again. Do remember, we are going to be a little bit spicy here on the refund on some of this, but we do have the NP gain off of Fragment of 2004 to be able to be used. And keep in mind that these refund numbers do not include Dantes' 3% per turn, so he should be fine on a lot of this. But as you guys can see here, looking right here at the first node, the assassin node, remember, refund's going to be shit against these guys, but you guys can see there's not really going to be any considerations for damage. We are still going to be splitting our defense downs as normal across all of these, but otherwise should be a nice, easy, quick comp for you. As we get to the Berserker node here, again, shitty refund purposes on some of this. This is going to be the one that you're really going to have to watch out for, is right here on turn 1, because this would be the exact 49% that you would need. So be very cautious with that. You can certainly try to pre-card, but be careful. Remember, this is Berserkers. Dantes is an Avenger. and these health values are not too much, it's very possible for him to just outright kill. The thing I'll tell you is if you're worried about that and you wanted to pre-card to assure this, then maybe pre-card with one of the Scotties instead, not him. Otherwise, you guys should be a-okay. Now, the good news about Berserkers is everybody's effective against them, so damage will never be a consideration against them unless we're using another Berserker. So as much as the refund gets bad, the health pool should not be. And then here you guys go. Here's going to be our caster node. The caster nodes, obviously the refund gets a whole lot better, but now all of a sudden the bicorn is going to start living here in turn 2. Now, again, 8.5k with all the crit stars you guys should be having. This shouldn't be an issue. You guys should easily be able to kill it. Just sometimes it might live about, you know, again, gonna be 72% of the time here that it'll live. But still, otherwise, it should be okay. It's never gonna live with very much health. Now we get to the saber node here. The saber node is, again, going to be sort of a relic of that better version of that day 0 node. So anything that works on this should also work on day 0. But especially when you guys don't have that MLB craft essence yet. So the only problem that you would have on the actual saber node if you were still unable to use it by this time is going to be just the health values here at NP1. But again, with the crit stars flying around, I see no reason you guys can't easily handle this. And remember, we are still splitting the defense downs to make sure that both of them have a chance to easily be killed. Now as we end up in the final node, the Lancer node, you guys can see refund not an issue. The only issue is going to be the demon there on turn 2, but again, should be easily handleable even with just double Scotty cards. The crit stars should make this easily doable. So ultimately, everything here is going to be fine. The problem is going to be we've bumped up to NP2. So if you tried to get this done with an NP1, it might work. You guys should be okay here on Bryn still at NP1, but it may be a little bit close. You may have to card. So the issue then would become the demon here on wave 2. And remember, you can play with the defense downs and try to card count and say, okay, I've got all my quick cards on this turn, so clearly I should use the defense downs on the other turn, and just kind of wait and see in that regard. But ultimately, again, this should be a very quick and easy comp for people to do. It's just going to be, you know, by this point in the game, are you really going to be wanting to use this over a 6 CE comp? Hopefully at that point you already have your MLB of your craft essence. Now, for our turn order with this Fragment to 2004 Super Scope comp, you guys are going to want to start out, obviously, with the front line of double Scotty and Dantes. There's no plug suiting, so you don't have to worry about that. You're going to go ahead and use both Scotty's first skills on Dantes right there and pop Dantes' second skill for his NP gain. Go ahead and let that first NP fire off, and you should easily be able to handle the wave. Now in turn 2 here, go ahead and use one of the Scotty defense downs as long as you think it should be. Go ahead and use one of the Scotty charge skills on that Dantes to top him off, and make sure you use your Fragment of 2004's NP Gen skill on this turn, but you only really need to do that in the Berserker node. So again, nothing too hairy there. Otherwise, some stuff will live, but you can go ahead and fire the NP off as well, and just be careful of the carding situations. Now, as we end up in turn 3, go ahead and use the final Scotty defense down. Go ahead and use the final Scotty charge skill on Dantes. Use Dantes' first skill to get him that extra damage, and use the Fragment of 2004's NP damage up skill on Dantes as well. And from there, you guys should be good. Everything should die pretty easily here. Occasionally, you might have to card after the NP, but again, really nice, quick, and easy comp for you guys. Okay, so next up we have the Lancelot comps. Now, Lancelot Berserker is a great unit, but as always, that's probably going to cause him some issues against Berserkers. Berserkers on Berserkers are typically not a good combination, and we're going to be doing a 6 CE comp for him here. Now, I will state this. If you have nothing else to use for the Berserkers, you can probably run this same comp, only add in a rash right at the beginning of that. Use sort of the overflow of waivers charge to get a rash to full with double MLB drop Cs. It should work. It's just, again, it's not necessarily going to be ideal, and people are going to have better comps for that, so we didn't end up including that in the video here. But that's just the big concern. Also, another concern that you're going to have with Lancelot is Lancelot kind of gets fucked by the later nodes. The Saber node and Lancer node in particular are sky traded, and Lancelot is Earth, so they actually counter him. And you guys are going to see Lancelot NP1 works for those other nodes until you get to the Saber and Lancer nodes where it becomes NP2 and NP3. So be careful with that. But otherwise, Lancelot should be a relatively quick and easy solution. Again, he's only a 5-star compared to Dantes, so nothing too bad. Now, as we're looking at our Lancelot comp here for the MLB Drop C, remember it's going to require having your own Scotty and taking one on support, which also means having your own waiver. You have to have both of those in order to be able to take something else. And remember, the MLB Drop C could be an issue for you guys early on in the event, with the Assassin node being basically day 1 of the event. So keep that in mind. You might have to replace with something else, or again, use potentially even something in the realm of a replacement craft essence with better starting charge or damage to help you out in the meantime. But otherwise, again, right here with the Assassins, your only concern is going to be refund, and really, you know, the refund right here is going to be the only issue, but we should be okay with the amount of charge we have in the party. So realistically speaking, it's just going to be Setheno here on day 1 that's going to cause a little bit of an issue, with her living about half the time and having 9.5k health remaining. But again, that should be easily something that anyone in the party can handle, stars regardless, because it is an Assassin node and you are taking all effective units here. As we get into the second node, the caster node here, again, refund becomes a whole lot better. It becomes a lot easier to manage, but now all of a sudden we've got a concern here with Edison here at NP1 Lancelot, with him living with about 17k. Now your casters aren't as effective, but remember, you should have defense downs on the enemy, you should have Plugsuit attack buff, and you should have critical stars. So I see no reason that you guys, even with double support caster cards that you'd have to use, shouldn't be able to just crit your way right through this and kill him. As we end up in the Saber node, this is where, like I said, we've had to skip over the Berserker node here, and now we're at the Saber node, and all of a sudden we jump up to NP2. This gets a little bit more hairy for him. But overall, really the only concern is going to be Suzuka on the final wave here at NP2, where again, it's about 18k. And the same sort of thing is like with Edison at NP1 on the caster node, you should be okay with the crit stars and the defense downs and the Plugsuit buff. And then finally here for the Lancer node, this is where it gets really hairy for him. We had to bump it up to NP3. Again, even at NP3, you guys can see, yeah, the demon's gonna live some, and against Brynhildr here in the final wave, she will only die clean 4% of the time, and will have a max remaining health of 26.6k-ish there. So that is not necessarily an ideal situation. Again, you should be okay, but watch the cards here, play accordingly. Remember, you can, instead of splitting the defense downs, sort of say, okay, I have the cards on this turn, so let me go ahead and shift the defense downs to the other turn. But again, we recommend splitting them for general purpose use. But if you want to pay attention and try to stretch the comp some, you can micromanage your card counting and defense downs. So again, you guys should be able to get through this at NP3, but it is going to be a concern here on this final node. Okay, so for our party composition, this is going to function a little bit differently compared to the Dantes comps. We're actually going to start out with a front line of double Scotty and Lancelot, then with Waiver on the back line. Now, for the turn order here, what you want to do is you want to make sure that you do both Scotty quick ups on Lancelot, go ahead and use one of the Scotty charge skills on that Lancelot, and then go ahead and pop Lancelot's third skill. That's going to get him the refund he needs as he NPs here, and he should easily handle waves 1 and get back to about 70% plus in terms of refund. As we end up in turn 2 here, make sure you take the Scotty that already used the charge skill and pop her defense down here. From there, rotate her out with the Plugsuit and bring in your Waiver. From there, go ahead and use Waiver's first skill on your Lancelot. That should get him the requisite charge he needs to get back to full, and you guys should be good to go ahead and NP one more time. He should handle most of the enemies in these waves very easily. He might have to card some a little bit after, but we'll just have to see. But again, he should refund to about 30+%, and that's exactly kind of what we're looking for. As we get to wave 3 here, you guys are going to want to go ahead and pop Waiver's last remaining skills to get Lancelot back to about 50%. And then go ahead and use the last remaining Scotty charge skill and defense down on Lancelot, and make sure that you have him charged to full. From there, go ahead and use your Plugsuit attack up and let her rip, and hopefully you should be good. Really, only the Lancer node there is going to cause you too much of a concern, with it having about 26k remaining, but the others there might have around 17k depending on a min roll of the damage, but ultimately with all the stars flying around and the buffs here, you should be okay. Okay, now just like with the 6 CE comps with the drop CE for Lancelot, we're also going to have the Super Scope comp. Now again, you guys could try to make this work using a normal K-scope and plug suiting, but again, at that point you're pretty much at that drop CE comp, so just go with the better efficiency of that. So this is going to be more the comp of, oh crap, I don't have MLB for a while, and maybe I managed to have a super scope so I can get the job done with less of a requirement in terms of supports and less button clicks in terms of Plugsuit versus Fragment of 2004 here. Again, this is a comp that should work, but same sort of problems will persist in this. We're going to end up having to use higher NP levels for the later nodes due to the counter trade. So that's going to be something you guys are going to want to watch out for. Also, keep in mind, Lancelot really isn't going to function too well against the Berserker node. That's why we don't recommend him, but you certainly, if you had nothing else, could end up doing that sort of like Plugsuit comp with the drop CEs, do double Scotty waver and using a rash, and have a rash handle the first wave, and you'd be able to automate the charge for the rest of the waves on Lancelot. All your concern would be at that point would be having the damage, but it's still really not going to be a comp that we recommend because the Berserker node is going to have so many solutions to it. You're right, here in the beginning, we are going to have this 5 CE comp, and it's going to be pretty straightforward, just like with the Dantes versions. Again, only NP1 here, right here on the Assassin node. Refund, as always, against Assassins is kind of poop, but it should be okay because we have the refund of the Fragment of 2004 skill, as well as Lancelot's third skill to handle those first 2 waves for us. So realistically speaking, nothing is going to cause him any sort of trouble. You actually get a little bit more damage output, if you guys remember, compared to the Plugsuit comp, because we had a Sathino here that was giving us a little bit of trouble at NP1 with that comp, but in this one she is going to die clean. Now as we end up in the caster node on day 2, you guys can see same sort of deal. We should be okay. Edison at this point though is going to actually start to live, but not nearly as much as in the other version. So realistically speaking, this is something that any one card from anyone would be able to handle, and it's still going to make it really clean most of the time, with them dying 92% of the time. Now as we end up in the Saber node, again, we've jumped up to NP2 here. We skipped over that Berserker node because we don't recommend it, but you guys can see Suzuka is going to be our problem in this one, and she will, again, really just be handleable by any one card from anyone, so it should make it a really clean node with her dying 93% of the time. And lastly, we have the Lancer node where, yes, again, the trade is just really beginning to screw us now, and we require NP3. However, unlike the NP3 of the other one, the health values are not nearly as much remaining, so you could try to min-max this and work around with NP2 if you had to. Just understand it's going to drop the damage pretty significantly, so be careful with that. But again, NP3 for relative peace of mind in this regard, and it should be a-okay with the demon dying to any one card in Bryn, maybe taking 2 of the Scotty cards if you got stuck with them, but otherwise being really easily handleable. Okay, now for our party composition here, obviously it's double Scotty and Lancelot on our front line. For the turn order, you guys want to start out turn 1s by using both the Scotty quick ups on Lancelot, and then for this one, you're just going to go ahead and use the Fragment of 2004's NP gen on Lancelot, and go ahead and NP. We're not going to be using the third skill just yet, and the first wave should die pretty easily. Now in turn 2 here, go ahead and use one of the Scotty defense downs, go ahead and use one of the Scotty charge skills on Lancelot, and go ahead now and pop Lancelot's third skill. And again, you guys can NP, he should handle the wave pretty easily. Some of the time he might have to card if something gets a min roll, but ultimately this should be a relatively easy comp as long as you're at those recommended NP levels. And then now we end up in turn 3. Go ahead and use the last remaining Scotty defense down and charge skill on Lancelot there. And then go ahead and use the Fragment of 2004's NP damage up for this turn to really help Lancelot with that damage potential. And again, most of the comps if you're at those recommended levels should easily be able to NP and handle everything here, with occasionally some people living on a min roll, but easily being cardable out. Alright, so next up we're going to start the Musashi recordings here, and again we have some interesting stuff going on. Musashi works on all the nodes. However, Musashi is different on some of the nodes. We have 3 different comps that will work. One of these is going to be K-scope, one is going to be Super Scope, and the other is going to be a 6 CE comp. So it's a little bit wary here, but just to begin with, we're going to be starting out with the K-scope one that works on the Assassin and Berserker nodes right here. So this is going to be a 5 CE comp. We're going to be using Arash, Waver, Tamamo, and Bride. Because of the staggered supports, this would mean you would need potentially 3 out of the 4 necessity units here. So you could either take a Musashi and have all 3 of these, or you could have 2 of these 3 and your Musashi and pick the one that you're missing. So that can certainly be a concern for people, but at least the good news about arts comps is that they're malleable like that and you are able to take what you need. This is just a basic K-scope at level 20. We are not assuming a super scope, but we do at least assume that you've leveled up that K-scope for the little extra attack power that you would get. Otherwise, you guys can actually use an MLB drop CE here on Arash. If you didn't manage to have one, you guys can use any 50% CE and it should work. Arash's damage is not going to be the issue here due to the turn order, so I think you guys are going to be fine here with the assassin node. We are also only requiring an NP1 Musashi for this, so congrats, that's going to be a nice easy barrier to entry right there. And then here on the Berserker node, now we've had to bump it up to NP2. The reason for this is both damage and refund oriented. Remember, Berserker on Berserker is not a good combination, but still we are dealing with the normal K-scope and support requirements here. And again, Arash's damage is going to be even more insane in this circumstance, with really only the white Manticore here on wave 2 being any concern for Musashi. It'll die cleanly 86% of the time and just need any one card from anyone to die. So really painless comp here for this. Okay, so for our party composition, be careful here. You want to structure this the right way because we're going to be using both a Plugsuit as well as Arash dying to rotate people. So I'm going to tell you guys to start out your front line with Arash, Waver, and Musashi Berserker. From there, you want on the back line Tamamo and Bride in that specific order. For our turn order, I want you guys to make sure you go ahead and use Waver's second and third skills to charge Musashi to full as well as Arash to full. From there, go ahead and use Arash's third skill, and he should be full at that point, and go ahead and fire off his NP. He's easily going to handle both nodes in that regard, and you shouldn't have anything to worry about. Now in turn 2, Arash's death should have brought Tamamo into the party. Go ahead and use her first and third skills on Musashi, and that should get her the buffs that she needs. Go ahead and rotate that Tamamo for your Nero Bride. At that point, use Bride's second skill to damage up on Musashi, and go ahead and use Musashi's second skill herself for the NP gain. From there, NP with Musashi, and she should easily handle everything that you need. Turn 3, now we want to go ahead and use Musashi's third skill for the damage output of it. Go ahead and use Bride's first skill for the charge and NP gain here, though you really won't need the NP gain at this point. And go ahead and use Waver's first skill that he still had in the tank. That should get Musashi what she needs to be charged to full. Use the Plugsuit attack buff and go ahead and NP with Musashi, and you guys should be fine again. Okay, so next up here we've got the potentially 6 CE comp for Musashi. And the reason we say potentially is you might not have the MLB drop CE at this point, but again, it should be okay. This one's going to work on the caster node, which is day 2, and the saber node, which is day 4. This is not going to work on the others because the reason for this is we can actually get away with it on these nodes due to the refund of these compared to, say, the assassin and berserker nodes, which are collectively shit for refund. So again, this one's going to be pretty nice. You're going to need both NP1 and NP2 to do this on both nodes, but NP1 here on the casters at least. Again, same sort of considerations. We are going to be using Arash to handle wave 1, and then we're going to be using 3 different supports here, which allow you to kind of plug and play with the one that you're missing, and potentially Musashi, even if you were missing her, but happen to have all 3 supports. So you guys can take what you need in this comp, and that makes it really nice. The fact that it's 6 CE will make it a very quick and easy comp for a lot of people. But again, it's going to be an interesting thing. You guys can see Edison here. He's a caster, so good refund, but you don't care by wave 3, so it's just a damage concern. And again, he's going to die cleanly 74% of the time. But realistically speaking, any one card should be able to handle this, maybe 2 with the supports, but otherwise this should be perfectly fine. As we get to the saber node here, again, we had to bump it up to NP2 for Musashi to get her the damage that she would need. You can certainly try to stretch it, but at the end of the day, it's not even the damage, it's really the refund here that's the big concern. We kind of had to get back to that exact amount. So that's why if you guys look at wave 3 here, the damage is perfectly fine. The damage is still close on wave 2 though, and that's kind of the issue. Is wave 2 is where we needed the refund, and boom, there you go. We had to get at least some overkill to get what we needed. You can always try to pre-card if you're really worried about this amount, but you guys should be okay here. Now this is actually going to have the same party composition as the other comp. We're going to start out with Arash in the front line, Waver, and then Musashi Berserker. Your back line is going to consist of Tamamo Caster and Nero Bride. For our turn order, you want to start out turn 1 by using Arash's skill 3, and that should get him 30% charge. Go ahead and use Waver's skill 2 and 3, and that should get him what he needs to be full at that point. And go ahead and fire off the NP with Arash. You should easily handle wave 1, and you guys should be good. In turn 2 here, Arash's death should have brought in Tamamo, so go ahead and use Tamamo's first and third skills on Musashi, and that should get her some extra damage. Go ahead and Plugsuit her out and bring Bride in. From there, go ahead and use Bride's first and second skills on Musashi, and that as well should get her what she needs to be full, as well as getting her that extra NP gen. Go ahead and use Musashi's second skill though for her own NP gen, and you guys should be good to fire off that NP as well. Nothing in the second wave in any of these comps should cause you any sort of issue, so you guys should be good. Now, in the third turn here, make sure that you guys use Waver's first skill on Musashi. That should pop her right back up to full again, and go ahead and pop Musashi's third skill for the damage output. From here, you guys can use the Plugsuit attack buff, and you guys should be good and easily able to handle all the waves here as long as you had the requisite NP levels. Don't forget though, guys, remember on that saber node, you guys might want to be careful in wave 2. Just pre-card if you need to, if you're really worried about the refund there. Okay, now we end up having our Lancer node sort of comp here. This is only going to be 5 CE, so that's going to be the demerit to this comp here, is that at the end of the day, we're having to use a super scope because we're having Musashi handle all 3 waves. The only issue that we have here is we did also have to step this up to an NP2 Musashi again. So this is a pretty nasty barrier to entry on top of the support requirements. So that's going to be a big issue, and it's why Musashi is probably not going to be anyone's solution for the final node unless she's all that they have. Again, maybe you just end up not having good sabers for that, and that could be a consideration, and it should work here. Worst case scenario, this is going to be the node that you guys are going to have available to you for a long time, so it just might be worth it for you guys to do that if you have no other better comp. And that's why we ended up putting this one in. We are still going to be using Plugsuit, so that is going to be a consideration. And the real problem with this is, well, the refund here. 69% on wave 2 is the exact bare minimum, so that's kind of why we ended up having to require NP2. NP1 would not have been able to cut it. But ultimately, you guys can see the damage is not the concern here, as she should easily be able to handle everything in the node. So at least that, you won't have to be waiting on things to get carted out or to, you know, kind of stall out the node in any sort of way. You should be good to go ahead and just kind of automate this process and go. Okay, so for our party composition, you guys are going to want to go ahead and start out with a front line of Musashi Berserker, Tamamo, and Nero Bride. For the turn order, start out by using Musashi's second skill for herself for that NP gain. Go ahead and use Tamamo's first and third for the damage up and the refundability that she's going to need. And then go ahead and use Bride's second skill for the attack on Musashi as well. And she should be good at this point to go ahead and NP. Everything in wave 1 will die pretty easily, and she should refund over 50%. Then turn 2, go ahead and use Bride's first skill on her to get her 30% more charge. Go ahead and Plugsuit out that Tamamo for Waver. At that point, go ahead and use Waver's second and third skills to bring her up to full, and then go ahead and NP. She should be good here. She will refund probably exactly 69% on the min rolls. That should be the exact amount that you need. Just be careful. If you're concerned, you can always pre-card. Again, in turn 3 here, now use Waver's last remaining skill to charge her up to full. Go ahead and use Musashi's third skill as well for the damage output, and use the Plugsuit attack up. And at that point, you guys are good to go ahead and NP, and again, nothing should live, so you guys should be good. This should be a clean comp for that final node. Okay, so now we have a beautiful Arjuna Alter 6 CE comp here. This is going to be great, guys. Again, this comp should work for everything on the Saber nodes and less. However, it's not going to work on the Lancer node, primarily because a rash, and we need a rash to be able to handle that first wave so that he dies and rotates. So that allows us to use that triple support there and get a whole lot of extra firepower to make this kind of work. Otherwise, Arjuna handles the other 2 waves himself. So again, this should handle everything on the Saber node, unless you are going to be required to have your own Waver and Merlin. That's going to be an issue unless you want to mix in a Scotty, and that is what these asterisks mean. You could turn this into Merlin, Waver, Scotty, and then be able to utilize kind of whatever you need. In fact, in a weird roundabout sense, Scotty might be a better choice, but maybe not. It depends. There are at least going to be 2 nodes that this comp covers, which is going to be the Assassin and the Saber node, where realistically speaking, you might have to worry about the boss on wave 3 resisting you. However, I want you guys to keep in mind that both Merlin and Scotty actually end up having debuffs in their kit. Merlin's is his second skill. That's the invuln he gives to the party, also will reduce the crit chance of the enemies. So that can actually be a way to debuff the enemy in case Arjuna Alter's debuff were to fail, as well as Scotty's defense down if you're using her. The problem with that is if the enemy then resists the defense down, you're doing less damage. So it just sort of depends. Double Waver would probably be safer, with Merlin at least being your sort of backup. Oh shit, maybe he won't actually end up debuffing the enemy with his own NP. So that would at least still get you the extra damage off of that first skill if you did have that. There's also command codes and stuff you guys could use to try and pre-card it if you're really worried, but ultimately that's going to be your big concern for this. However, again, this one should work for everything that is the Saber node and less. So that is your Assassin, your Caster, your Berserker, your Saber node as well. Everything there should be good and able to be done with this comp. So relatively straightforward and easy. So for the party composition, I want you guys to structure it like this. Go ahead and use Arjuna in the first slot, a Rash in the second slot, and Merlin in the third slot. From there, go ahead and put on your backline double Waver or Waver and Scotty, depending on who you took. For your turn order, go ahead here on turn 1 and use a Rash's third skill for the 30% charge. Use Merlin's first skill for the 20% charge and attack up. And from there, go ahead and NP with a Rash and he'll easily handle all of the wave 1s. Now in turn 2, Arash's death should have brought in one of those supports from the backline, but we're not going to use them yet. So go ahead and use Arjuna's first and second skills. That should get him the charge that he needs as well as his damage. And then go ahead and use Merlin's third skill to bust her up on Arjuna. From there, go ahead and NP with Arjuna, and again, you should be easily able to handle wave 2. In turn 3 here now, go ahead and use all of Waver's charge skills on Arjuna and bring him up to 50%. Go ahead and rotate him out for the other Scotty or Waver on the backline and use their skills on Arjuna, or in Scotty's case, use her charge skill on Arjuna and the defense down. And if you still are worried about the debuffs landing on the enemy, you guys can also use Merlin's second skill like we talked about earlier. Go ahead and then use the Mystic Code attack buff and you guys should be good to NP and easily handle all the waves again. Okay, now we have your 6 CE solution with Arjuna Alter for the Lancer node. Again, the things to pay attention to here, we are using an NP2 Arjuna Alter now, so we had to step it up from the requirement of the earlier nodes, and we're using a Chen Gong to handle wave 1. We are assuming him to be at NP5, and we do require you to have his third skill at 9 at least, and the reason for that is Arjuna Alter's damage output. Again, though, you guys can see he actually pretty okay handles the final wave. Really, the concern is going to be here on wave 2, but 5k should be easily handleable. You might even be able to get away with less on that Chen Gong buff. Just be very, very careful. However, because of this, we are going to be requiring double Waver and Scotty, which means having your own Waver and having your own Scotty now at this point. This one's not the plug and play kind of that we had for the first couple nodes with an NP1 Arjuna Alter. This one's definitely a higher requirement, but it should work, and Arjuna Alter can handle 2 of the waves himself. So that is going to be the nice part about this comp. And again, we are going to have to be concerned with the party structure of the comp, so be very careful here, but let's go ahead and talk about that. So for the party composition, I want you guys to go ahead and start out the structure with Waver in the first slot, Chen Gong in the second, and Arjuna Alter in the third. From there, go ahead and put Waver and the other Scotty in the next slots in the back line there, and you guys should be good. Now in turn 1, I want you guys to go ahead and use all of Waver's skills on Chen Gong, and at that point you guys can already go ahead and fire off Chen Gong's NP because he should be fully charged, and he should easily be able to handle that first wave since he's damage bonus in the event. And that actually should give you guys no real trouble, with only the big snowman living 30% of the time with at most 2k health. In turn 2 here, Chen Gong's NP killed off that first Waver, so he's going to bring in another Waver for you. From there, go ahead and use Arjuna's first and second skills to get him charged up to full, and then go ahead and actually use Waver's third skill for some extra attack power here and have him NP. At NP2, he should kill the demon 73% of the time cleanly, but for that other times, it's going to live with at most 5k health, so it should be easily able to be carted out. Now in turn 3 here, go ahead and use Chen Gong's second skill to get Arjuna altered to 10%, and then use the third skill on him for that damage buff, then Plugsuit him out for that Scotty in the back line. Go ahead and use Scotty's skill 2 for the defense down, and skill 3 on Arjuna Alter to get him up to 60%, and then use your remaining Waver skills on Arjuna Alter to get him up to full. From there, go ahead and use the Plugsuit attack buff, and you guys should be good to fire off that NP, and he should easily handle everything at NP2 with Bryn never living. Alright, so now we've got the Space Ishtar version of our 6 CE comps, and this one's actually pretty accessible, though we do start to get up there in terms of the NP level for Space Ishtar on some of the later nodes. And the reason for that is because of the RNG on Space Ishtar's third skill there. We actually calculate this in the same way that we calculate Tesla, which is assuming failure. She has an 80% chance to proc her arts up, which is going to be the one that we're concerned with here in this comp. And the problem with that is going to be if she fails, it's going to hurt her for refund purposes, and it's going to hurt her for damage output. Even at only 20%, it's still a significant event that will happen, especially as you guys start doing hundreds of nodes. So it's why we calculated it this way. Do understand if it does fail, that's what can happen, but if it does succeed, you guys' numbers will be even higher. And in some of the cases, I'm going to let you guys know where I think you guys could step down in terms of NP level if you wanted to take that risk. But again, otherwise, we're going to be using Paracelsus to handle our first waves here. We really only require the first skill at rank 3. If you had an MLB drop CE on him, it would only need to be at 1. If you don't, it does need to be at 3, just so that he gets 60% charge, and you guys will see why in a minute. But otherwise, we do recommend that you actually have his second and third skills at 10. There might be some times where you can get away with it at 9, but I think it's the Berserker node in particular where it's right on the cusp. Space Ishtar's at exactly 50% that we would need in terms of refund. So that's going to be why. I know everyone's going to be lore conscious here, but Paracelsus is someone that has been useful in a whole lot of the Lottos, and he certainly will be useful here in these comps. So it's up to you to decide whether or not you want to do that. But the nice part about this is Paracelsus is going to be handling that first wave, taking the need for Space Ishtar to handle all 3 waves herself and the charge requirement of that off of her. We will be using Waver and Tamamo, but the good news about that is everybody has Paracelsus, so you guys could take what you need again between Space Ishtar, Waver, and Tamamo. You maybe could take a Paracelsus, but good luck finding one on support. Even with someone like Tamamo, it might be hard to find her on support at times. So that's going to be why we're going to say this, but at least in this case, you can take one of the 3 that you need, and as long as you have the other 2. But ultimately right here for the first node here with Assassin, NP1 is going to be able to cut it. You guys can see only Satheno is going to be a little bit of an issue there in the final wave, and really it's not going to be much because that should be easily cardable out. As we get to our Berserker node here, again, still NP1 being the requirement, but boom, there you go, it's that exact 50. So the lowest she could possibly have there refunding on wave 2 would be 49%. Anything less would kill her. and her ability to loop. So that's why this one's right on the cusp for those people considering not lowering Paracelsus' skills. But remember, this is also assuming a proc failure. If you were to succeed, she would do better in terms of refund, but that's going to be the issue you guys are going to have here. Is we want this comp to work even when that proc fails, so that you guys don't get frustrated and wind up 4 turning, 5 turning, 6 turning in some cases. The white manticore is only going to be the only issue here in the Berserker node, but really, again, it's a Berserker and it's Space Ishtar. You guys shouldn't have any issue. Everyone's going to be effective against that. Now, as we end up on the caster node, we have had to bump it up to NP2. Not because of refund. Refund against casters is really easy, but because of damage. So again, remember, we're assuming the proc failure. You guys might be able to stretch this at NP1 if your proc succeeds. So sometimes you would fail to be able to 3 turn if it fails, but if it succeeds, you should be at least reasonably able to card out Edison at the end. So that's going to be the consideration that you'll have with this if you wanted to try and stretch this one. But again, overall, this should be a relatively easy node, especially as long as you have NP2. As we get to the Saber node, though, it's still NP2 requirement. Refund's still not an issue, but not only is the Corrupted God going to live here some of the time with a proc failure, but Suzuka will live with 15k. This is the one where I don't think you guys can step it down to NP1. I think you would end up getting ultimately screwed by this if you did get a proc failure, and you would not be able to clear, and you might even have some issues with Corrupted God if you didn't get the right cards. Remember, there's no Starbomb CE in this one like there was with Gilfest, so really the benefit here is having starting charge on the CEs, but it doesn't mean that. It basically means that if you're not using the quick comps, you're not going to really have the ability to crit in a lot of cases, so you guys got to watch out for this. But again, as long as you guys have that NP2, this node should be easy. Suzuka is going to be your only consideration, and you should be able to reasonably secure 3 turns against that health value there. And now as we end up in the Lancer node, this is where it gets spicy. We did have to bump this up to NP3 because, as you guys can see, at 23k, that is pretty rough. If you want to risk it, you could reasonably step down to NP2, and the proc success should leave you at about the same number. But again, that's assuming it does succeed, so you will have times where it won't, and you will have to go the distance. But if you were super desperate and Space Ishtar was all you had, again, that would work for you, and this would be a 6 CE comp, so it would be worth doing. Again, though, here you guys can see the big snowman in turn 1 is going to at least have a significant amount of health remaining, and the snowman in turn 2 would also cause you issues, especially if you were to step down. But ultimately, the refund is not an issue here from here on out, so you guys should be okay. Okay, one last note here. So for the Assassin and the Berserker nodes, we end up with a little bit of an issue where on a lot of them, we actually plotted this out to use Waver Skill 3 on the first turn to give Paracelsus a little bit extra damage output, but he doesn't need it against the Assassin and the Berserker nodes. And in fact, the issue reverses. Paracelsus doesn't need damage, but Space Ishtar needs refund coming off the back of Wave 2 because she actually would need to get to 60%. For the other nodes, she does it just fine, but for the Assassins and the Berserkers, she doesn't. So we need the charge instead for her. So we would switch using Waver Skill 3 to the final turn to help her out with that. Because of this, if you were to use a non-MLB drop CE on the Assassin or the Berserker node with Paracelsus, you would actually need to get his charge skill to rank 7. So it's just something I wanted to mention there, and I will talk about it right here in the turn order. Okay, so for your party composition, I want you guys to start out with Space Ishtar, Paracelsus, and Tamamo on the front line with your Waver on the back line. For turn 1 here, let's go ahead and use Space Ishtar's first skill, that's her attack up, and go ahead and use Paracelsus's skills all on Space Ishtar and use his charge skill as well. From there, go ahead and use Tamamo's first and third skill on Space Ishtar, and that should get Space Ishtar the damage that she needs going forward, and then Plugsuit out that Tamamo for Waver. Now, go ahead and use Waver Skill 3 here unless you're on the Assassin and Berserker nodes. And then go ahead and fire that NP with Paracelsus. He should be able to charge to full and handle the wave pretty easily. Sometimes he might have to card though. In turn 2, go ahead now and use Space Ishtar's third skill. That should charge her to full, and she should be good to go ahead and NP. If you got the proc, congrats, that's going to help you out with the arts up that you got off of that. If you didn't, be careful, you might end up having to card out at sometimes. In turn 3 here, go ahead and use Space Ishtar's second skill. That's her ability to change the NP type. Make sure you stay arts. It's also going to give her some NP damage up. Go ahead from there and use Waver's skills right here on Space Ishtar, and make sure you use the third skill if you hadn't used it already, and then go ahead and use the Plugsuit attack buff. And from there, Space Ishtar should be charged to full, able to NP, and easily able to handle the enemies. Nice easy comp, 6 CE, exactly what we want. Okay guys, that's going to be a wrap for the universal looper type video. Again, these are the people that were able to handle just about all the nodes. That's kind of why we wanted to give them their own video so that you guys could just focus on this. This is sort of going to be a bellwether to see whether or not you need to look at the other comps and use other stuff. So it's kind of why we wanted to handle this one. If you have comps here that work really well, you guys should be good. If you don't, maybe take a look at some of those other comps, particularly on the Lancer node. There's going to be a lot of good comps that we're going to have for that one, so make sure you check that one out. In the meantime, guys, you guys can always come ask me about the videos or ask me down below. Let me know if you guys have questions, and you guys can always check me out on Twitch or on Discord. Again, Twitch, I stream 7 p.m. Eastern on weeknights, always FGO, so feel free to come and check me out there. Otherwise, I'll see you guys for the next video. Thanks for watching. Good luck.